have a pair of biological parents who are extremely patriarchal. When I was in the second year of junior high school, my parents owed usury and ran away with my brother. They said I was useless, so they only left me behind. My hated stingy grandmother became my only guardian. Many years later, I found that the person I hated had become my only light. I am a person with a very weak emotional awareness. When Xu Cuicui died, I looked at the familiar face under the white cloth indifferently without shedding a tear. When Xu Cuicui was sent for cremation, I didn't shed a tear when I took the square little box. But when I finally went home to sort out Xu Cuicui's belongings, after seeing those things I collapsed and sat on the ground, hugging the cardboard box and crying. I suddenly remembered that the first time I met Xu Cuicui was at the police station. On that day she jumped out from some corner, looking like a typical rural woman. She looked for me for a long time through the crowd before she loudly asked the police if this was my granddaughter. I turned my head away with a bit of disgust, and remained silent. I just felt that my life was about to be ruined. My original intention was to live in the dormitory and go home once a week. It was snowing heavily that day. I carried my luggage and called my parents, but none of the calls went through. In the end I had no choice but to go home alone with a large bag of luggage. The elevator had just reached the floor when a group of people who looked like thugs stood at the door. My heart sank immediately and I didn't know how many times faster I breathed. I turned around and knocked on the neighbor's door. My parents owed usury and ran away with my brother. This news was undoubtedly like a bombshell. I couldn't believe that my parents who loved me so much would leave without saying a word to me, but that was the fact. From then on, Xu Cuicui was my only guardian. It's funny to say that before I met Xu Cuicui, I almost forgot that I had a grandmother. I was not familiar with Xu Cuicui. When she took me home, she scolded my father all the way, asking how she could give birth to such an evil son. This I couldn't quite understand the dialect of that kind of speech. I just looked at the flying saliva and subconsciously wanted to dodge, but he held my wrist so tightly that I couldn't break free. It was like being roasted on iron. I felt that my future life seemed to be no different from being in prison, and I was being roasted. At that time I was used to a life of luxury in the city, and I wanted to escape from the moment I got on the train. Xu Cuicui kept talking to me, but I just frowned in disgust and kept silent. The first reason was that I didn't want to talk to her, and the second was that I disliked the smell on this train. Xu Cuicui saw my attitude, and she muttered to herself, and then she stopped talking. I soon fell asleep, probably because of family changes. I had a dream. I dreamed that my parents came to pick me up. I was on a plane, and I was going to go abroad with them, live in a villa in a big city, and take pictures under the Statue of Liberty. The little girl woke up, and finally I was woken up by Xu Cuicui. I opened my eyes, and there was no villa or Statue of Liberty in sight. I was not on the plane, and the green skin the train was crowded, and it was quite frustrating. Xu Cuicui was a very stingy person and not gentle at all. I wanted to buy a bottle of water on the train, but she stopped me. On the way home, I argued with the auntie at the vegetable market over a dime. A few years ago, the government introduced a new policy that you can live on the street by paying some money, but Xu Cuicui didn't pay and continued to live in that corner. Her house was very small. As soon as I entered, I couldn't help but say the first sentence. This house is too stingy. When Xu Cuicui saw me talking, she finally laughed and was willing to talk. I opened and closed my mouth. I was so angry that I didn't want to speak. I just felt like I had lost the battle. Xu Cuicui looked around the house, and I couldn't understand the expression in her eyes, but her eyes fell on the big tree in the yard. She stopped and stared at the tree in a daze for a long time. My house is like this. If you don't want to live there, don't live there. Now go find your father and mother to see if they want you. I was speechless. What Xu Cuicui said was true. My parents dumped me and took my brother away. Now no one would take care of me except Xu Cuicui. Junior high school students are sensitive by nature. When I realized that my parents might really not want me anymore, I wanted to cry. I felt insecure and confused about the future, which made me very scared. Xu Cuicui didn't say anything else. She just sat up and asked me to follow her to pay the tuition. This is a small town with not very developed network and transportation, but there is a small school 2 streets away from home. Xu Cuicui took me to register for admission. I looked at the broken tables and the podiums with few pieces of chalk along the way, and I couldn't imagine myself studying here. You know, no matter how bad the environment of schools in the city is, it is countless times better than here. I hurried over to ask Xu Cuicui if I wanted to study here. Maybe her tone was too unbelievable, so Xu Cuicui quickly pulled me off, turned around and said to the teacher in front, "Little girl just arrived yesterday and is not familiar with the environment." The teacher nodded gently and didn't care. "Then the school has meals here. Do you want to pay for the meals or take them out yourself?" Xu Cuicui said. Chui said immediately, "We can do it ourselves and bring it ourselves." From then on, I felt that Xu Cuicui was too stingy. I turned my head and looked at this shabby school, with only endless loss in my heart. I really hated Xu Cuicui. Xu Cuicui was also a person who got angry very easily and loved to cry. I had deeply experienced this since I met her. After living in Xu Cuicui's house, I was woken up by her at 6 o'clock in the morning on the first day. When I went to the vegetable market with her to buy vegetables, I felt like an empty shell without any strength. It was really annoying. I was annoyed to get up in the morning and to go out to buy vegetables. Xu Cuicui was the person I hated the most. Now she was walking in front of me, completely unaware of my troubles. She took me into the messy crowd and forced her way to the front. I didn't know what to buy, and I didn't have much strength, so I naturally hid in places with few people. Before I could calm down for a while, Xu Cuicui yelled that the shop owner was cheating because he weighed the wrong thing. The shop owner's daughter happened to be there, so she started arguing with him and even brought up he was talking nonsense and stamping his feet in anger. Suddenly, as if he remembered something, he looked around at me. My scalp was numb and I wanted to run but was caught. "Little girl, you are an educated person. What do you say we should do about this?" I was so confused that I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know what was going on. I was embarrassed and wanted to drag Xu Cuicui away quickly, but he insisted on standing there and saying enough. Finally, I couldn't stand the gazes from all around me, so I shouted first and turned and ran away. I didn't look back and couldn't see clearly what kind of look Xu Cuicui was looking at me with. In short, I didn't want to stay any longer. It wasn't me who made the mistake, and it wasn't me who wanted to quarrel with others. I finally left the vegetable market, and Xu Cuicui trotted after me, asking, "Where are you going?" After a long time, I didn't plan to talk to him and walk towards home with him. Why didn't I walk faster than him? Of course, it was because I didn't know the way, but my small action of slowing down by half a step was taken by Xu Cuicui as a gesture of goodwill. He muttered that I should either keep silent or talking. It was scary. I looked at Xu Cuicui's back and listened to her poor Mandarin. Such a narrow and thin old lady, a rural woman who didn't look like me at all, actually became my only guardian now. I looked at her unusually thin back, afraid that a gust of wind would blow and she would be scattered and float away like dust. How would such a person support me? What would my future life be like? I stared at her back in a daze and thought of my current situation and felt sad. The sun had just risen in the morning, and several old ladies came out of the village to chat. Their eyes lit up when they saw me. Oh, where did this little girl come from? She is so fair and tender. Along the way in the city, people who knew Xu Cuicui and those who didn't came to ask about me. Xu Cuicui not only didn't notice my discomfort, but also pulled me from behind her to the front, saying, "Come on, little girl, don't be so depressed, say hello." My head started to hurt again, and I could only laugh awkwardly. When Xu Cuicui saw me laughing, she laughed even more. She actively took me over to chat and insisted on saying hello to people, but I didn't even know them. Finally, I slowly gathered my emotions like a volcano and began to erupt in an instant, as if I couldn't bear it anymore, or as if for some other reason. I said this impatiently and directly shook off Xu Cuicui, not caring whether the road was right or not, and ran forward, annoying me to death. When Xu Cuicui saw me running away, she seemed to want to catch up with me, but she finally lost me at a corner. She was old and couldn't run fast, but the village was so small that I could find my home by just walking around, but I just didn't have the key. I thought about it carefully and realized that I really didn't control my emotions. Xu Cuicui meant well. If I felt uncomfortable, I could just talk to her and there was no need to get angry. After all, I had no way to change the fact that I lived with Xu Cuicui. So I sat at the door and waited. It took me 5 minutes to run home, but it took Xu Cuicui a morning to find me. When she saw me, her first reaction was she picked up a small branch on the ground and was going to hit me with it. I was so scared that I subconsciously closed my eyes, but the pain did not fall on me. Xu Cuicui cried. She weakly threw away the branch in her hand, did not speak to me, walked around me into the room, and did not even exchange a glance with me. I didn't know what this feeling was. My heart was blocked, and my original desire to talk properly was swept away. In the small house, I stood outside the room and Xu Cuicui was in the room. No one spoke to anyone actively, so would he drive me away? There was silence for a long time. I sat on the chair, fingering my fingers uneasily. It was past noon, and the afternoon sun was very scorching, but I couldn't help shaking all over. I was more afraid that Xu Cuicui would not want me, and that I would really be an orphan. In the end, Xu Cuicui did not drive me away. She got a bag of instant noodles from somewhere, soaked it and put it in front of me, saying lightly, "I don't like instant noodles very much, but I'm really hungry, so I just held it and started eating." Those neither of us said the explanation, but I know that Xu Cuicui said sorry to me with a bowl of instant noodles, and I also told her with my actions that I was sorry too. I thought that today's matter would end here, but I started to have diarrhea in the evening. I seriously suspected that Xu Cuicui was deliberately taking revenge on me, and gave me expired instant noodles. After checking, it was true. So I endured the abdominal pain and went to the dry toilet at the door of my house. Xu Cuicui didn't say anything, but illuminated the door with a flashlight. I really wanted to curse. Going into a dry toilet in summer is like giving blood to mosquitoes to tell them that the meal is ready. When I came out, it was not because I didn't want to poop, but because I suspected that I was being sucked twice and I was going to be anemic. I frowned and said to him impatiently, but Xu Cuicui pinched her lips to defend herself, saying, I didn't know that the bag of instant noodles was expired. Don't you know to check the production date? I'm really tired and don't want to say anything anymore. But the anger in my heart is coming in waves. I don't know, he said that and I really can't do anything about him. At that moment, it was as if all the faults and unhappiness were put on him. I scolded him and said something about him. I cried and asked Xu Cuicui what had I done wrong to have to endure all this. My parents left me and chose my younger brother. Did they not love me? If they didn't love me, why did they give birth to me? Xu Cuicui looked at my excited emotions and wiped away her tears. Only then did I realize that an unreasonable old lady like him during the day could also cry. Xu Cuicui said again, I don't know. He doesn't know that such an environment would cause such great harm and blockage to me. What Xu Cuicui didn't know was that when I said how disgusting sweat stains were, Xu Cuicui had been covered in sweat stains since she was a child. When I said that instant noodles were expired, Xu Cuicui had never been willing to eat that bag of instant noodles. He heard other children say that instant noodles were delicious. Seeing a bowl of instant noodles on the train was so expensive, it was a delicacy he had never seen before. He only knew that a bowl of bagged instant noodles should be treasured and eaten. I said that the instant noodles were expired, and his first reaction was, can instant noodles also expire? He didn't know. He didn't understand what I said. I only knew that I cried twice today. After venting, I could only walk home exhausted. I was still irritable before falling asleep. I really hate Xu Cuicui. I think she is the person I hate most in my life. If possible, let someone else be my grandmother, anyone will do. The first day of chaos ended, and I slept very soundly. The next day, I was woken up by Xu Cuicui at 6 o'clock with resentment. This time it was not because of buying vegetables. It was because I was going to school today. My classmate happened to be the girl who had quarreled in the vegetable market yesterday, Zhang Man. She was beautiful, with an indescribable feeling of a beautiful girl next door. When the teacher led me in, the boys in the class quickly burst into whispers, and one by one they lowered their heads and rushed to sit at the same table with me. At that time, I still had the so-called arrogance of a city dweller. I raised my head without even bending my back, and looked high and mighty. I admit that these envious or jealous eyes made me feel good. Zhang Man was one of the jealous girls. Her father ran a butcher shop, and almost half of the people in the vegetable market came from her. I screamed in pain and my originally straight back bent and curled up. Should I resist? Or how should I resist? If I resisted, how could I block it? Everything they put on me, I told you to pretend to be noble, let me see how you seduce boys today. Zhang Man disliked the dirty trash can, so she asked other girls to dump the trash on me. They poured cold water on me but didn't beat me, so there was no mark on my body. I went to tell the teacher but got no evidence. Even if I fell, I could have left so many marks. At that moment, sitting in the office, I looked coldly at the gentle teacher in front of me whom I met for the first time. Bad guys are all similar. Under Zhang Man's charming face, there is vicious school violence. Behind the teacher's gentle and sweet smile, there is irritable indifference. I think my life is like this. After experiencing school violence, I don't even have a person to rely on. At this time, the door was kicked open by Xu Cuicui. My grandmother was holding a stick that she picked up from somewhere. Little girl, don't afraid, this was her first word. I stared at her blankly, just like in the novels I had read before. There would always be a prince with a sword to save the girl. But it was not the prince who came, it was Xu Cuicui, and what she held was not a sword but a stick. But at that moment Xu Cuicui pushed everyone away, as if no one could defeat her, and stood in front of me telling me that she was here. She said, "Little girl, Grandma is here." I seemed to have found an outlet for my emotions. The first time I saw Xu Cuicui, I pointed at Zhang Man, crying and saying that she bullied me. She poured chili sauce on my head, and my eyes hurt so much. Grandma poured cold water on me and I felt so cold. She poured garbage on me and I complained. At this time Zhang Man's mother also came. Looking at me crying, she turned around and slapped Zhang Man in the face, asking her to apologize. She was a mother, of course she knew whether her daughter could do such a thing. I hugged Xu Cuicui helplessly, and her rough palm stroked my head. She also cried. "Good child, our little girl is a good child, don't cry." Xu Cuicui also cried to comfort me. He couldn't stand seeing me cry. He panicked when I cried. I will never forget what happened that day in my life. When I think about it many years later, I still miss her. I miss Xu Cuicui, who stood in front of me without hesitation. Finally, Zhang Man's mother took out a few hundred yuan from her bag. In that era, a few hundred yuan was not a small amount for Xu Cuicui and me. Xu Cuicui only took half of it and he wanted the rest. Zhang Man also felt my pain. He stood in front of me aggressively with no intention of giving in. I pursed my lips and took the remaining money from Zhangman's mother. We don't need it, we want money. Xu Cuicui looked at me in shock. I took her hand and dragged her out of the school. It was late when we came out. The stars surrounded the moon and the cicadas chirped around. I thought I had someone to rely on, but Xu Cuicui was so annoying. She made me cry so miserably. I still slowed down Xu Cuicui by half a step and looked at her back. Zhangman is still so thin and old. Xu Cuicui, I don't want to change my grandmother. You are so thin, let me protect you. After this incident, I never saw Zhangman again. Seems that she changed classes. Before the change, he talked to the monitor without giving up. Junior high school boys are very dull about feelings, and he is not as precocious as Zhangman. But after listening to the whole story, he felt very guilty. I said several times that it had nothing to do with him. There is nothing wrong with liking someone, and there is nothing wrong with the person who is liked. The monitor shook his head and began to accompany me to the cafeteria for lunch every day. Xu Cuicui would still bring me lunch at noon, but she would not give me chili sauce. Everyone seemed to be frightened of this incident. Only I ate when I should eat and slept when I should sleep. I knew Xu Cuicui was busy, so I, a person who had never touched housework, began to learn to cook, help her harvest rice, help her plant rice seedlings, and study harder. I wanted Xu Cuicui to live a good life. I was afraid that such a thin girl would be a gust of wind blew away. Xu Cuicui often stared at the big tree in the yard in a daze. I have also heard the story between her and Grandpa. The big tree is actually a symbol of her missing Grandpa. This small house was built brick by Grandpa, and it has accompanied Grandma for countless years. He is like an old tree. He can only leave his roots here in this life. Dad is the only son in the family. Grandpa and Grandma spoil him, which leads to Dad's irresponsibility. He runs away after owing money and never comes back. When Grandma mentions Dad, there is actually no ripple in her heart. She just thinks it is unreasonable for her to give birth to such a son. I also think it is unreasonable. I even hate Dad for the first time after listening to it. He can actually do it. He never mentioned Grandma once and never came back to see Grandma. After Xu Cuicui finished speaking, she continued to stroke the old tree. He can always say a lot when he is old. When I am bored, I sit on the side and listen to him. After all, there are only two of us. The day of the high school entrance examination is coming soon. I am like crazy. To study, was admitted to a good high school, walked out of this small village, and went to study in the county town. However, the high school in the county town did not allow boarding, only accompanying students, and the tuition was very expensive. I knew Xu Cuicui could not afford it, so I discussed with her that I would find a job in a factory during the summer vacation. Anyway, I could always make enough money, just that it would be a little harder. But what I didn't expect was that Xu Cuicui grabbed me in the morning one day, and said that she agreed to the demolition. The country had long wanted to demolish this piece of land in the countryside after the relocation. Xu Cuicui had always disagreed. She couldn't bear to leave the house, the big tree, and her grandfather. I didn't expect her to agree. I asked Xu Cuicui why. Xu Cuicui sat in the yard for the last time, smiling foolishly, stroking the big tree with her fingers. Every inch of the lines fascinated her. He said he didn't know, and I was speechless. The old man was dead, but the little girl was still there. After a long time, he held back a sentence like this. Xu Cuicui had been lonely for too long. He needed someone to accompany him, and I was abandoned by my parents. Only Xu Cuicui accepted me, and we both only the other person was left. That day I leaned against the room and Xu Cuicui was outside. I listened to his chattering just like a long time ago when I stood outside the door, worried that Xu Cuicui would abandon me. Old man, I'm moving out tomorrow. You're so mean. You didn't even leave me anything. But can I still be partial to you now? You've been buried for so many years. I have to take care of the little girl. The little girl is sensible and obedient, good at studying and pretty. Don't worry. Possible say goodbye to me. The branches suddenly swayed and leaves fell. Xu Cuicui reached out and took the leaf. She looked at it for a long time, and tears fell one by one in a crying voice. Old man, he shouted without saying anything, just shouting old man. I had been crying in the house for a long time. Xu Cuicui was really annoying. Every time I cried, it seemed like it was because of him. If those who agreed to the demolition had no place to go, the government would first find a place for the demolished households to live. Xu Cuicui and I, so we moved to the county town. For the whole summer vacation, I didn't go to the factory. I made handicrafts at home with Xu Cuicui and then sold them. At that time, there were always people selling popsicles on tricycles, hawking them around the streets. The most extravagant thing we did was to buy a popsicle after selling our handicrafts, and bite off half for me and half for Xu Cuicui. On the first day of school, the class monitor asked me to eat hamburgers. It was the first hamburger restaurant in the small county town. Xu Cuicui told me to go home early. I laughed that she worried too much. The class monitor and I were admitted to the same high school, so it was convenient to meet in advance this time. I would have a companion to go to school together tomorrow. When we arrived at the restaurant, the class monitor had already arrived and asked me what I wanted to eat. I looked at the hamburgers in this restaurant which were not regular and grabbed a waiter, but I didn't expect it was Zhang Man. When he saw us, he was also very embarrassed. He pulled my hand away as if he didn't recognize us. He didn't get into high school. He is working here now. I guess he will go to a vocational high school when school starts. The 5-year class. He groaned and I nodded. I am not a person who holds grudges, but I cannot forgive school violence, and I can never forget the indelible scars it has left on me. However, I will not express any unequal views on vocational high school and high school. In my opinion, no matter it is vocational high school, university or failing the entrance exam, there will always be a way out that suits you, regardless of academic qualifications. This road only represents that Zhang Man, and I will probably never meet again in the future. We found a new waiter and took a small menu with various colorful patterns printed on it. At this time, ketchup was not included with hamburgers and you had to buy a pack. I bought 2 packs. The monitor saw that I bought a pack too. I smiled embarrassedly. This pack was for my grandmother. The monitor did not have any other expression. He was not embarrassed and would not ask any more questions. He politely turned the package of French fries towards me. I was a little touched and stuffed the ketchup into my pants. I planned to go home and let Xu Cuicui taste it. She would definitely like to eat it. With such I had this idea. After returning home, I immediately took out the ketchup from my pocket and gave it to Xu Cuicui to try. Xu Cuicui frowned and continued to weave her handicrafts without any interest. If she didn't eat it, it would be for the children. I ignored Xu Cuicui and opened it and took a bite. She said it was unpalatable, but then I said she had to finish it after opening it. Xu Cuicui reluctantly tasted a little. How about it? It tastes good, sour and sweet. What is this? Seems to be called ketchup. Isn't it made of tomatoes? We were chatting when there was a knock at the door. I laughed cheerfully a few times and went to open the door. A woman hugged me and called my nickname Mom. I was stunned for a long time before I found the tune in my mouth and made a sound, shaking in disbelief. I looked at the mother in front of me. At that moment, I suddenly turned my head to look at Xu Cuicui who was sitting in the room. She just sat there looking at me quietly. I thought you didn't want me anymore. My mouth was bitter and I lowered my eyes. Do I love my mother? There is no doubt that I do. I love her very much. My loving mother, she raised me for more than 10 years. So I was so painful when I found out that she had left me and taken my brother away. But since you gave up, why did you come back to find me? Mom, the most hateful thing in the world is not the abandonment of loved ones, but coming back to me after the abandonment, after I have adapted to the new person telling me the difficulties, crying to me about how difficult it is. The saddest thing is that I can't make a choice between Xu Cuicui and Mom. It was very silent that day, so silent that there was no word at all. Yin Yin, go with your mother. My mother held my warm hand and comforted me gently. Anyway, Grandma lives here, you have the chance to come back and visit during the holidays. I suddenly thought of that green train. It takes half a day to get from my home to Xu Cuicui's home. A distance of thousands of kilometers. Is it really easy to meet again? Let's go, little girl. Xu Cuicui suddenly looked at me and smiled, holding my hand. I seem to have seen this smile before, but my brain it was too chaotic. After I packed my luggage and got in the soft leather sedan to go home, I had some space to breathe in the car. I remembered where I had seen it. When Grandma was stroking the traces of the old tree that day, I saw a sad smile of reluctance. He said at that time that he wanted to accompany the little girl. My heart suddenly ached dully. Xu Cuicui lived on memories. Before I was born, he lived on the old tree and the house. Those items were equivalent to half of his life. But after I was born, he lived on me. We only had each other. I wanted to get off the car, but I wanted to be with my mother. This contradiction struggled in my heart. In the end, I chose to comfort myself. There was still a lot of time in the first and second year of high school. I would come to see Xu Cuicui. It would be a long time. I would return to the city to reunite with my family. At first, I was very worried about Xu Cuicui. I always called the home landline number and chatted with Xu Cuicui. Xu Cuicui always told me not to worry. She picked up a kitten. It was so well behaved. I felt relieved to hear that she had a companion. Xu Cuicui asked me to study hard and buy her melatonin when I grew up. I smiled and said okay, I would buy her a carload of melatonin when I grew up. From then on, I studied hard and my parents started to go out early and come back late. After the accident at home, life was not as affluent as before. My brother and I tried our best to study, hoping to lead to a better future through learning. The conversations between Xu Cuicui and me became less and less, from once a week to once every 2 weeks. Xu Cuicui said that the county is developing very fast now, and several hamburger shops have opened. Xu Cuicui said that a large supermarket has opened in the county, and it is much cheaper to buy a whole pack of instant noodles. Xu Cuicui said that the kitten is not well behaved at all, and always wants to run around. Xu Cuicui said that she dreamed of her grandfather. Xu Cuicui said she missed me. Finally, during the Chinese New Year, my mother took me back to the county to see Xu Cuicui. He had lost weight. I don't know how he could lose so much weight in a year. The light shone on him. Obviously it was such a warm color. Xu Cuicui smiled happily those days, and I was very happy too. He was still sharp-tongued and joked with me that he had an old phone, the flip-top kind, and said that I would use this one for phone calls in the future. Xu Cuicui and I went to eat hamburgers together. He couldn't bite them, so he could only eat the bread and threw the meat inside to me. Only then did I realize that Xu Cuicui seemed to have aged very quickly recently. After the Chinese New Year, I had to say goodbye to her again. That morning, the sun had just come out. I stood at the door and shouted to Xu Cuicui, "Grandma, see you next year." In a trance, I saw Xu Cuicui seem to be stunned for a long time. When she seemed to react, she nodded with tears in her eyes. I went back to continue studying. In my dreams, I took Xu Cuicui home and lived in a big house. My dad was not filial, so let me be filial to Xu Cuicui. I like Xu Cuicui the most. Xu Cuicui, you have to wait for me. That day, there was an extra wish in the girl's diary, wishing Xu Cuicui a long life. Our school specially held a joint entrance examination with other schools. I'm about to enter my second year of high school. The school pays more and more attention to us. I didn't do well in the joint entrance examination, and was at the last place on the red list. My time was greatly compressed and divided into pieces by Chinese, English, mathematics, and science. Everyone around me was trying their best to study. I was not assigned to the top class when the class was divided, but to a slightly lower one. The students here were not as smart as those in the experimental class, and there was no freedom as in the ordinary class. There was only endless internal competition and competition. There was a girl who burst into tears during the exam and then tore up the paper. My pressure was getting bigger and bigger, but there was no way. I could only grit my teeth and study. Xu Cuicui would call me and cry occasionally. She cried that studying like this would ruin my health, and why should I cry? I said it was because I wanted to buy you a big house and take you to eat many things. I wanted Xu Cuicui to know that the county town is not big, instant noodles are not some delicacy, and melatonin is not a luxury that she can never afford. I want Xu Cuicui to go to high school with me in my sophomore year. I did not go back to see Xu Cuicui. Xu Cuicui said her cat ran away. In my senior year of high school, I still did not go back to see Xu Cuicui. When I talked to her on the phone, I heard that her tone was very listless. I asked Xu Cuicui if the cat came back, and Xu Cuicui said no. I sighed and listened to Xu Cuicui's chattering. She seemed to have endless things to say to me, but I only talked for 5 minutes and had to continue studying. I knew he was reluctant to let her go, and so was I, but it didn't matter. There was still a lot of time. When I was admitted to university, I would go back to see Xu Cuicui. My grandmother was going to live to be 100 years old, but unfortunately the longevity I expected will never come true. Dear Xu Cuicui, my grandmother, the rural woman who didn't look like me at all, left me forever. Only then did I know that Xu Cuicui had been in the hospital all the time. She had never said a word to me. She had no cat, and not many people chatted with her. After losing me, Xu Cuicui became a lonely person. She was not happy. When I learned that when I heard the news of her death, I almost immediately rushed back to the county town, but still missed the chance to see her for the last time. The little old lady who was so thin and small eventually turned into a small box, quietly held in my hands. Xu Cuicui was thin when she was alive, but after her death, she was like the other small boxes, almost numb. I quietly returned to my grandmother's house and began to sort out her belongings bit by bit, and suddenly found a big box with a note on it saying gift for the little girl. I opened it and found bags of instant noodles inside. At my grandmother's funeral, I didn't cry. I didn't cry when I looked at the small box of ashes, but when I saw the box of expired instant noodles, I cried and opened it with trembling hands. It turned out that it wasn't that the instant noodles had expired, but that I was late. I just hadn't seen her for 2 years. How could I never see her again? I continued to check the boxes and saw a pile of ketchup neatly placed inside. I picked up the ketchup and began to kneel on the ground crying. Xu Cuicui thought I liked instant noodles, so she bought them. There were so many instant noodles that I couldn't bear to eat. She thought I liked to eat ketchup, so she made so much and put it in a box to send it to me. The little girl's voice kept ringing in my ears. From then on, I didn't have a grandma. She didn't want me anymore, and no one would ever call me a little girl like this again. Xu Cuicui was stingy. Xu Cuicui was not gentle. Xu Cuicui was stingy. Xu Cuicui loved to cry. Grandma Xu Cuicui, don't leave me. I'm sorry, Grandma. I haven't grown up. I haven't been with you, and I haven't done what I promised you. I even only called you Grandma. I'm sorry. Grandma left you alone in the hospital. Xu Cuicui without the kitten has been alone at home since I left, and sold the old house for me. She didn't even miss my grandpa. A long time ago there was a big tree in the yard. Grandma closed her eyes under the tree for a long time. A long time later, the yard was gone, the big tree was gone, and Grandma was gone. I don't hate Sutsutsa, Grandma, I really miss you. The whole text is over.